I have a strong feeling I am really going to enjoy this video, and it is going to be the best video that we've ever recorded in history. 2 off seasons ago, the Mets signed James McCann to a 4-year, $4.6 million contract. There was absolutely no one that expected this contract to be bad. 2 years later, he has been a negative asset on this team. With the emerging phenom prospect Francisco Alvarez getting ready to take the job, James McCann's contract has officially become the main candidate to get rid of this offseason. I think it's safe to say that he's on his way out. So I'm going to retain trying to keep a smile on my face for this entire video as we deal out 3 trades that the Mets can make to get rid of James McCann's contract.
Two, Vader. Swings, misses, strike 3. He struck him out. 5 big pitchers combined for the second no-hitter in New York Mets history.
Now, to make this genius signing by the Mets look a lot better, James McCann is getting a raise next year, where they backloaded for the last 2 years of the contract. So for him to play like shit and then also get a $4 million raise, it's not ideal. So this is a trade video, so that means that the GM Rhino will take the stand as the star of the video, and all I'm doing is sitting in the corner and hoping that the Mets just get rid of this useless piece of shit.
If you're looking at James McCann as a trade asset, he is a very big negative. Some of these names are not the sexiest names. James McCann's most likely scenario for the Mets in the offseason is to be outright cut, and the Mets get nothing for him, and they go to another Robinson Cano Island of $20 million. You're trading a negative asset, you have to put a sweetener or any kind of value to have the other team accept any type of trade. So again, there will be some prospect capital given up. First trade is going to be for a starter. Second trade is going to be for a reliever. And a third trade is going to be full of spite, like this whole video is going to.
Given this situation, I think the Mets are going to have to take a toll of a bad contract for a bad contract. But as for someone who's not giving you any value, I mean, you have to get rid of him somewhere. It's most likely that he does get cut. There's most likely that he is going to be just dead money on the payroll. But as for asset management, it's important to explore trades like this. We love asset management here. It's a very important thing over here at Mets Weekly. So give me your first trade. What do you got?
Kind of makes sense with the Mets' lack of starting pitching depth. And if he, worst case, is your 5th starter, he's not the best, but he can potentially give you innings. They make a call to the Arizona Diamondbacks, and they see if they can get Madison Bumgarner. He's not the same player that he was with the San Francisco Giants when they won 3 World Series titles. He had a very good first couple months with the Diamondbacks, and then once June hit, he went back to being what he's been lately, and that has been pretty bad. I have the Mets getting about $10 million from the Arizona Diamondbacks. He has $32 million left over 2 years, where James McCann is at $24 million. They give you 10, dumbing it down to $23 million over 2 years, and you get a guy who potentially can give you some innings out of the starting rotation. And the sweetener going that way would be Dominic Hamill. Starting pitching prospect, maybe reliever. Again, with the Mets starting pitchers, our pitching prospects, they look more to be relievers. Also could lose Carson Kelly to free agency after next season. They do have Dalton Varsho, but he's really not playing behind the plate anymore. He's really just playing the outfield. They could use a catcher to go in with their young staff, and Bumgarner can give the Mets value, so have some good innings out of your 5th starter, so you don't have to play Tyler McGill and David Peterson in the rotation for that 5th spot.
Is there any way that you would add maybe another prospect to this one? So maybe you could get another utility piece like a Dalton Varsho or a Josh Rojas, a type of piece that can be versatile. Would you add that to this trade, or would you just go 1-for-1, bad value for bad value?
Josh Rojas is an idea that could be met. Obviously the Mets could use some utility. But, Dalton Varsho is coming off a very good year, and you're probably looking to potentially add a top 12 prospect in a trade for Dalton Varsho. I think the Mets need to be selective what prospects they move, and giving up extra assets for a trade that's just trying to move McCann is not that type of trade.
We obviously know that this is going to be a salary dump, but I would love to get something back that is not Madison Bumgarner, so we don't just get one terrible contract for one terrible contract out of it. But again, like we said, we're not going to get that many sexy names in this entire trade. But if the Mets had a little bit more in mind for a trade for bad contract, like we've seen in the past with a lot of teams trying to offload deals, that's definitely something that I think they might do. But we've seen them hold on to their prospects a lot recently. So it's an idea that I would definitely approach because I'd love some versatility off the bench. Just an idea. So we all know that the bullpen is definitely going to need a lot of help this offseason. We've talked about this way too much already. So how would you get an addition to the bullpen by subtraction of McCann's terrible contract?
Two, I think it's the most potentially likely because, again, the Mets should take this $10 million and see if there's a bad reliever contract because obviously, like we said, the rotation isn't dismantled. So is the bullpen. Potentially, this is a guy I had high interest in last year, and that is calling up the Chicago White Sox. And yes, James McCann had a lot of success there. And you'd be like, why would they want him back? They have Yasmani Grandal. His contract is up at the end of the year at $18 million. And obviously, Dylan Cease was their best starter. But a guy that they thought was their ace in Lucas Giolito has not been the same since James McCann has left. But he has been horrific with Grandal. And the Mets could use a reliever. And the White Sox have spent a lot of money in relievers. And they have a contract that I didn't like when he signed it, but now it being 2 years, and he's a younger reliever, obviously for relievers, age 31 is pretty young, and that is Kendall Graveman. He's got 2 years left at $8 million, so it's $16 million over 2 years, $8 million this year, $8 million next year, and he could come in and be the seventh inning guy. Yes, this year was not a great season after being in Houston and Seattle, did not have a great season, but again, Jeremy Hefner was brought back, so if his pitching lab is as great as what people think, you bring a Kendall Graveman in, younger reliever, again, a big thing is we don't want a bunch of 36-year-old like Adam Ottavinos, add some youth and having him under contract for 2 years, come in and maybe be that seventh inning guy. You put him into the bullpen. You're gonna have to attach an asset, and this trade is Matt Allen. I've made it clear. I think Matt Smith made it clear. We are not a big believer in Matt Allen. This guy cannot get on the field. I don't care the high upside. This dude has thrown 10 innings in the last 4 years. Since he's been drafted, there has been over 100 guys in his draft class that have made the major leagues already. It is time to move on from a dead asset. I don't care what the upside is. Dude hasn't pitched. The Mets get a win now reliever, and the White Sox can potentially find a way to maybe get Lucas Giolito fixed with bringing back James McCann.
I think it's definitely an idea because of just the relationship between the pitcher and the catcher, and that's definitely a very sacred piece of it. We all know that Chicago White Sox fans did not want to see James McCann go. So you know what? You get him back. Have fun. Kendall Graveman, great relief. I think he's got some decent stuff. I think he definitely can be a good middle relief option. Do I think he's a frontline guy that he was signed to be? Probably not. But other than that, if you want more pitchers that work well with James McCann, White Sox, Taijuan Walker's available. He's all yours. Have fun. Now, since Kendall Graveman is currently in his reliever prime, shall we say, could this uptick the value for him? And maybe the Mets would have to take on something else like Yasmani Grandal. Could you include him in this trade? I think that might be a very interesting thing because maybe he could mentor a guy like Alvarez, and he also can give you some value from the offensive side.
Thought I was going to bring it up in my video that I did my dream offseason. It's something I did think about. If they were to move $18 million of Grandal's contract, the Mets could definitely use it. Yes, Tomas Nido would be the perfect backup because obviously he was a Gold Glove nominee. He's a great defensive catcher, but potentially have a guy in Yasmani Grandal who was 2 years ago the best catcher in the game. Influence for Alvarez. I wouldn't mind it. Again, the Mets have the financial flexibility to take on some bad contracts and to get Graveman plus a high on base guy that could potentially fit in the Billy Epler role of guys that gets on base. The problem is, what do you do with Tomas Nido? Do you non-tender him? That's the other question. If you were to bring in Grandal plus and having Alvarez as your catcher, what is the future of Tomas Nido in that situation?
It's probably one of the best situations to have as of right now because I think that when you look at pretty much the third string catchers that we've had in AAA, that they're not really that good. I don't need another Patrick Mazeika. So if they have to store Tomas Nido in AAA, they're going to have to do it, or they let him loose, but I don't think that they're going to do that. Flip-flop DH with one of your bats like Vientos or even Alvarez. But if the Mets want to kill two birds with one stone, I'm okay with them doing that. If they can trade for a reliever, they can trade for a reliever. So since this is a spite video for me, I guess, because I am not very fond of James McCann, give me your spite trade.
The last trade is a trade pointed towards starting pitching and being a fifth starter. Again, I do think the Mets are going to go out and spend some money to get a new 3-4, trading for a guy who has some term, and especially what the prices for starting pitching is on the market. This is pretty much what a fifth starter in today's game goes for, and that is calling the Chicago Cubs. They are obviously losing Wilson Contreras. They don't really have a catching option option internally to fill in that right away. And I have the Mets calling the Cubs and saying, hey, what is the availability of Kyle Hendricks, a guy who can take the ball every fifth day, can give you 5 to 6 innings every start. But again, you need to throw in a sweetener. And I think Mets fan will agree the sweetener fits pretty well for getting rid of an asset who walks everybody and is horrific to watch, and get a command guy who just take the ball every fifth day. And let's say Kyle Hendricks for James McCann and David Peterson. You know, the Cubs can need a replacement fit starter. He can go out and take the ball every fifth day and go give Cubs fans heart attacks. You know, their fan base is the age of like 90. So, you know, I don't think that would be good for their health.
As much as it would be nice so I don't have to hear about this guy anymore, I really don't see this happening at all. Considering the Cubs do need a catcher, losing Wilson Contreras in free agency, who they've pretty much said that they're not going to re-sign. I guess as to what Wilson Contreras is going to get in free agency, it's definitely a discount, and they're also getting rid of a contract in Kyle Hendricks for a team that's definitely rebuilding on prospect and a lot more young pieces. As for someone who does strike out a ton but does hit for a lot of power, what do you think they would have to include to maybe bring in someone like Patrick Wisdom?
Wisdom is a guy that could fit the Mets. He doesn't really have a position, so he would probably fill in the Darren Ruff role. He does kill left-handed pitching with power, and he's a guy I would definitely love to see the Mets as a bench guy. I think kind of like Josh Rojas, and in the Rojas Varsho, I think you're going to have to add a prospect of some sort. The Mets are not in the greatest situation to trade, and a la Brody Van Wagenen cleared out so many pitching prospects, so many prospects in general, and we'll see what else they spend money on this year. So the Mets are not in a situation to continue just to keep pumping prospects. If you can get maybe 1 or 2 prospects for these type of trades, as you notice, it's been 1 prospect to just a sweetener to take the deal for bad contracts. One more team I want to throw in the conversation because they are looking for a catcher, obviously, to replace their Hall of Famer. They are looking at Wilson Contreras. They're looking at Sean Murphy. But if they were to strike out on both of them, could this potentially pivot to the Mets? And, you know, again, you eat down some of the McCann contract. They do have a former Met, and that being Steven Matz. And yes, Matz and the Mets should not reunite, but it could be a talking point of the Cardinals needing a catcher. The Mets could use an additional swing man / maybe third, second lefty in a bullpen, emergency spot start guy. It does line up. Again, if he had a different name, I think Mets fans would be more willing to look at it. But again, it's just something to throw out there if the Cardinals were to strike out and getting Wilson Contreras and Sean Murphy.
I think that's more of a desperate for desperate type of situation where the Mets really eagerly want to get rid of James McCann and get assets for him, and the Cardinals desperately need a catcher. Now, one more question. Is there a reason why you've had a cow on your head the entire video?
What cow?